Sophia smiled sweetly, her voice dripping with false sincerity as she looked up at me. "There's nothing between Jason and me," she insisted, her eyes never wavering from mine. "We're just friends. Nothing more." I watched her carefully, keeping my expression neutral. She had no idea what I already knew. The truth was right in front of her, hidden in the phone that lay just out of her sight. She kept texting him, whispering secrets behind my back, while I sat quietly, watching, waiting for the right moment. I could see it in the way she spoke, the way she avoided my gaze when I asked about Jason. She thought she was being clever, weaving her web of lies, but I knew better. She didn't realize that her lies had already unraveled in my hands. The evidence was irrefutable. The messages, the hotel receipts, the photos, they painted a picture she couldn't escape from. Tonight, I would expose her. At dinner, as we sat across from each other, the light from the candles flickered in her eyes. She looked beautiful, as always, but there was something different about her tonight. She was tense, her nervous energy palpable despite her attempts to mask it with that perfect smile. "I'm really glad we're spending time together," she said, as if it was just another normal evening. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Her eyes flicked nervously to it, but she quickly returned her gaze to her salad. I slid the phone across the table, the screen facing her. "Care to explain these?" Her hand froze mid-motion, her fork suspended in the air as her face drained of color. The phone screen was filled with the messages, the intimate exchanges between her and Jason, the plans they made, the secrets they shared. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted from the screen to me, to the phone, and back again, like a deer caught in headlights. For the first time, she had no words to protect herself. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. My heart was calm, but my mind was alive with the satisfaction of seeing her exposed at last. She had thought she could fool me, keep playing this game of deceit, but tonight the game was over. Sophia's breath caught in her throat as she finally read the messages on the phone. Her eyes scanned the texts quickly, and for a brief moment I thought she might be able to deny it, but the silence between us was deafening. There was no hiding the truth anymore, no way to twist the words into something else. She was caught. She placed the phone back on the table, her fingers trembling. Her face was pale, and I could see the panic slowly creeping up behind her eyes. I'd spent weeks, no months, gathering everything I needed to finally confront her. She had assumed I was oblivious to her little games, that I would never catch on to the lies she'd been spinning behind my back. I had let her think that for so long, watching as she grew more confident in her deception. But tonight, the tables had turned. "Adam, please," she said, her voice faltering as she tried to regain her composure. "This isn't what you think. I can explain." Her words sounded hollow, empty, as if she believed repeating the same line would somehow fix everything. But I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses. I'd heard them all before. I had spent so many sleepless nights staring at the phone, wondering when she would finally slip up, when the truth would spill out. And tonight it had. She was standing on the edge of her own ruin, and all I had to do was let her see how far she had fallen. I remained silent, watching her closely. The calmness in my demeanor seemed to unsettle her even more. The Sophia who had once been so sure of herself, the woman who thought she could control everything, was now unraveling in front of me. I could see the flickers of guilt in her eyes, the way she avoided meeting my gaze. There was nothing she could say to fix this. The truth was right there, staring her in the face. She glanced at the phone again, as if somehow hoping it would magically disappear. But the evidence was irrefutable. There in black and white were the messages between her and Jason, plans for secret meetings, intimate words, and the undeniable truth that she had been lying to me for months. I had known about their affair for weeks, but I had let her believe she was still in control, and now it was my turn to take control. Sophia shifted in her seat, visibly uncomfortable as she searched for a way to explain herself. Her usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a growing sense of desperation. "I didn't mean for this to happen, Adam. I was just confused. I thought I could handle it, but now I see how much I've hurt you. Please, just give me a chance to make it right." I leaned forward slightly, my voice low and calm. "You don't get to fix this, Sophia. You don't get to undo what you've done. You've crossed a line, and there's no coming back from it. She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. No, this isn't something you can talk your way out of. I'm done listening to your lies. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I saw the woman I had once loved, the woman who had been everything to me. But that woman was gone now. The trust we had shared was shattered, and nothing could ever put it back together, not after what she had done, not after all the lies. Her hands shook as she wiped her eyes. Please, Adam, I never meant to hurt you. I didn't want to lose you. You mean everything to me. Her words were coated in regret, but I could see through them. They were empty, just like the promises she had made before. I had heard this all before. You don't get to play the victim, Sophia. You made your choice the moment you started this affair. I gave you every chance to come clean, to be honest with me, and you chose to keep lying. She stared at me, her lips trembling as she tried to find the right words, but there were no words left. I had taken all the power from her, and now she was nothing more than a woman caught in the consequences of her own actions. For the first time in what felt like forever, I finally allowed myself to feel the anger that had been building inside me. Not the blind rage that would have led me to act impulsively, but the quiet, controlled fury that came from knowing that I had won. She had thought she could juggle both worlds, our marriage and her affair, with no repercussions. She had thought I was weak, that I wouldn't catch on. But she was wrong. I had been watching. I had been patient. And now I was watching her crumble under the weight of her own lies. I think it's time you go, I said, my voice cold and firm. There's nothing more to say. Her face crumpled in shock, and she stood up quickly, stumbling slightly as she grabbed her bag. Adam, please, don't do this. We can fix this. We can start over. But I remained motionless. No, it's over. She paused at the door, her back to me as she tried to compose herself. Then, with one last look, she walked out, her world crashing down around her. Sophia left without another word, her footsteps echoing in the hallway. I sat there, still at the dinner table, staring at the spot where she had just been. The air felt thick, charged with an intensity that hadn't been there before. It was over. The lie had been exposed, and nothing would ever be the same. But I wasn't sad, I wasn't angry. I felt nothing but a quiet, satisfying sense of justice. The silence around me was almost comforting, as if the world had suddenly shifted back into balance. I had waited so long for this moment, for her to finally understand the consequences of her betrayal. She thought she was clever, hiding behind her lies, thinking she could play me for a fool. She never realized that I had been watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. I took a deep breath and picked up my glass of wine. The calmness I felt was almost unnerving. There was no doubt in my mind that Sophia had left for good this time. She had made her bed, and now she would lie in it, alone. I sat back in my chair, allowing myself to reflect on the years of trust we had shared, the love that once seemed unbreakable. It felt surreal, as if everything I had known was now a distant memory. How could I have been so blind? How could I have ignored the small signs, the late nights, the unexplained absences, the way she suddenly became defensive when I asked about Jason? It had all been there, right in front of me. But I had given her the benefit of the doubt because I trusted her. That was my mistake. I heard a faint sound coming from the other room. It was the front door closing, followed by the unmistakable sound of her car engine starting. I stood up slowly, walking to the window. I watched her car pull out of the driveway, the brake lights briefly flickering before she disappeared into the night. I wasn't sure what to feel. Part of me wanted to feel devastated, as if I had lost something precious. But there was nothing left of the woman I had once loved. The betrayal had erased it all. The truth had burned away the illusions. My phone buzzed on the table, breaking the stillness. I picked it up, expecting a message from Sophia. Instead, it was a notification from an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. The message was brief but chilling. She's not the only one who has something to lose. My stomach tightened. I wasn't sure who had sent the message, but it felt like a warning. Or maybe it was an empty threat trying to make me second-guess myself. It didn't matter. The damage had already been done. Sophia had made her choices, and I was no longer the man she had manipulated. I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen, needing something to ground me, to give me something to focus on. I grabbed a bottle of whiskey and poured myself a drink. The warmth of the alcohol spread through my chest, but it didn't dull the clarity in my mind. The truth was like a sharp blade, cutting through everything. There was no going back. I was finished with the lies, finished with pretending that everything was okay when I had known, deep down, that it wasn't. This was my chance to start over, to rebuild a life free of the deceit and betrayal that had slowly poisoned everything. The night stretched on, but I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel anything but a strange sense of calm determination. The hardest part was over. Sophia had been exposed. She was gone, and with her, all the lies she had spun around me. I thought about Jason, the man who had been so sure he was untouchable. What would he do now that the truth was out? Would he try to come crawling back, hoping for forgiveness? Would he try to deny it, act as if he was innocent in all of this? I couldn't care less. The damage had already been done, and now it was time for both of them to face the consequences. I glanced at the clock. It was late, but I didn't want to sleep. I wasn't ready to let the night end. There was a strange satisfaction in knowing that I had taken control of my own fate. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making her pay for what she had done. It was about reclaiming my power, my dignity, and my life. She had thought she could break me. She had thought she could walk all over me, but I had proven her wrong. The phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I picked it up and opened the message without a second thought. It was from Sophia. "Please, Adam, I'm sorry. I don't know what to do. I made a mistake. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, feeling a wave of something cold wash over me. Her words were nothing but a last-ditch attempt to regain control, to salvage whatever shred of dignity she thought she had left, but I wasn't falling for it. I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the keyboard for a moment. Finally, I typed a single response. "There's nothing to talk about." I hit send and leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of the moment sink in. This was the end. Sophia had made her choice, and now it was my turn to move on. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the empty street outside. It felt as though the world was waiting for me to make the next move. Whatever came next, I was ready. This was the beginning of something new. The next few days passed in a blur. It was almost as if the world had shifted on its axis, and I was left standing still, watching as everything I thought I knew crumbled away. Sophia was gone, and with her, the illusions of a life we had built together. There was a strange quiet in the house now, an emptiness that I had never noticed before, but instead of feeling lonely or lost, I felt liberated. For the first time in years, I could breathe without the weight of deception hanging over me. I didn't have to question her every move, second-guess her every word. The truth was finally out, and it was a truth that I had known deep down for so long, but had been too afraid to confront. Now that it was laid bare, there was no turning back. I spent my days going through the motions. Work, meals, the occasional call with friends, but my mind was always elsewhere. It wasn't on the business deals I was wrapping up or the meetings I had planned. My thoughts kept drifting back to Sophia, to the life we had shared, the plans we had made, the way she had deceived me so easily, so convincingly. It was hard to believe that the woman I had loved so deeply had been capable of betraying me in such a cruel, calculated way. I had trusted her with everything, my heart, my life, my future, and she had thrown it all away for a fleeting affair. What was worse was the fact that she had never once thought I would catch on. I thought back to the night I had confronted her. The moment I handed her the phone, the look on her face as she realized I had known all along. There was no denying it anymore. No more excuses or half-hearted apologies. Her eyes had gone wide with shock, and in that brief moment, I could see the fear behind her calm facade. She thought she could hide behind her lies forever. She thought she could keep her little secret, her affair with Jason, safe in the shadows. But I had been patient, watching from the sidelines, gathering everything I needed to expose her. And when the time came, I had struck with precision. That night after she left, I had sat in the silence, savoring the feeling of control that came with finally taking charge of my own life. For years, I had let her dictate the terms of our relationship. I had ignored the warning signs, convinced myself that everything was fine. But now there was no room for doubt. The affair had been going on for far longer than I had suspected, and I was nothing more than a pawn in her game. The thought of Jason, of the man who had thought he was untouchable, made my blood boil. He had no idea what was coming for him. He had played the role of the charming lover, the one who swept Sophia off her feet, thinking he was above the consequences. But he had underestimated me. Like Sophia, he had assumed I was weak, that I wouldn't do anything about what they had done. Well, he was wrong. I was going to make sure they both paid for their betrayal, not in some dramatic outburst or confrontation, but in the quiet, devastating way that only the truth could. The truth had already shattered Sophia's world, and soon it would do the same to Jason. I wasn't going to rush it, though. I had time, and I had all the evidence I needed. The texts, the photos, the receipts. Everything was neatly organized, a perfect picture of their affair. Jason thought he was safe because no one knew. He thought that as long as Sophia and I kept up appearances, he could keep living his life without consequence. But I had seen through his smugness, through his false confidence. He wasn't as untouchable as he thought. The plan was simple but effective. First, I needed to get him to face me, to stand in front of the undeniable proof of his betrayal. Once he saw the truth, once he knew that there was no way to hide from it, I would let him crumble under the weight of his own guilt. Just like Sophia, he would realize too late that I had always been one step ahead. As the days passed, I could feel the tension building inside me. There was a part of me that wanted to confront Jason right away, to throw it all in his face and watch him squirm. But I knew better. Revenge was best served cold. And when the time was right, I would make sure Jason knew exactly how it felt to be on the other side of betrayal. In the meantime, I focused on myself. I started doing things I had put off for years, things that had been neglected because I was too busy living a lie. I went for runs in the mornings, I picked up old hobbies that I had abandoned, and I spent time with friends who had been patiently waiting for me to wake up. It was freeing, this feeling of rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened, it was about moving forward. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be difficult conversations, awkward encounters, and the inevitable fallout. But I was ready. I had been living a lie for so long, and now I was ready to live in the truth. And the truth, for once, felt like a weight off my shoulders. The days had blended into each other, and the quiet tension in the house had settled into something more manageable. I had grown used to the solitude, the absence of Sophia's presence, and yet there was still a lingering sense of something unfinished. It was a feeling I couldn't shake, a constant reminder that despite everything, there were still loose ends to tie up. I wasn't about to let them go. Not yet. I had spent the last few weeks in a state of focused clarity. No distractions, no emotional outbursts, just pure calculation. The confrontation with Sophia had been the first step, but there was more to be done. Jason had to be exposed in the same way, forced to confront the mess he had created, just as Sophia had. He thought he could play both sides, slip through the cracks without facing the consequences. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I had kept track of his every move, gathering more evidence as I watched him and Sophia's affair unfold. It was almost too easy. Jason was arrogant, careless, believing he was safe because no one knew the full extent of what had been going on. But I had all the proof I needed. The texts, the calls, the hotel bookings. They were all there, stored on my phone like a carefully constructed weapon, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. There was something strangely satisfying about knowing everything, about being the one who held all the cards while he remained in the dark. The balance of power had shifted, and I wasn't going to let go of it. Not until I was ready to make my move. It was late one evening when I finally decided it was time. I had been waiting for the perfect opportunity to confront Jason, to reveal the truth in a way that would strip him of any control. It couldn't be rushed. He needed to feel the weight of the betrayal, the full impact of his actions. The moment had to be just right. I texted him, simple, direct. We need to talk now. I knew he would respond. He had to. Jason was never one to back down from a confrontation, especially when it involved his own reputation. He would show up, just like I knew he would, thinking he could talk his way out of it. But this time there would be no talking his way out. There would be no excuses. The truth was coming for him, and there was nowhere to hide. When he arrived, he was as confident as ever, striding into the house with that familiar smirk plastered on his face. He thought I was still the man who had no idea, the man who had been in the dark all this time. He had no clue what was waiting for him. I didn't greet him. I didn't offer him the usual pleasantries. I just handed him the phone. The same phone that had exposed Sophia's lies. The same phone that now carried the weight of his betrayal. He looked at it, his eyes scanning the screen, and I watched his face change as he saw the texts, the photos, the undeniable proof of everything he had done. His arrogance faltered for just a moment, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "It was enough. You thought you could get away with it, didn't you?" I asked, my voice low but steady. "You thought you could play both sides, keep everything hidden in the shadows? But you were wrong." Jason took a step back, his confidence slipping away. "Adam, listen, this isn't what it looks like." I cut him off before he could finish. "No more lies. There's nothing you can say that will change what's already been done. You've betrayed me just like Sophia did. You've crossed a line, and now it's time to face the consequences." His face flushed with anger, but he knew there was no point in denying it. He had been caught, and there was nothing he could do to fix it. The weight of his guilt hung in the air between us, and for the first time, I saw him as nothing more than a coward. "You don't understand," he muttered, but his voice was shaky now, no longer the confident tone it had been before. "Sophia and it wasn't supposed to be like this." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "It never is it? You thought you could keep this secret, that no one would find out, but the truth always comes to light, Jason. Always." There was a long silence, broken only by the sound of his heavy breathing. I could see the realization dawning on him. He had lost. He had been exposed, just like Sophia, and now, just like her, he had to face the consequences of his actions. "I'm not going to beg for your forgiveness," Jason said, his voice trembling slightly. "But you have to understand, it wasn't meant to hurt you." "I don't need your excuses," I replied, my voice cold. "What you did is unforgivable. And now, you're going to live with that." With that, I walked away. There was no need for further conversation. Jason had already been exposed, and nothing could change the fact that his betrayal was out in the open. It was over.